First of all, I want to introduce our interviewer. So our interviewer tonight is Kim Krutka, and she lives in Denton, Texas, and she's been an elementary school librarian for 8 years. She loves her job working with students and staff to promote a joyful reading culture and engage in fun, creative activities in their STEAM Innovation Lab, the Creation Commons. She's currently pursuing her doctoral degree at UNT in information science, focusing on anti-oppression work in the school library. So everyone, please welcome Kim Krutka. We're happy to have you here tonight. And then I'd like to introduce our guest tonight. Our guest is Kate Hebert. Did I say it right, Kate?
Perfect.
Okay, great. And she is an elementary lead librarian in Alvin ISD. Her home campus is Nelson Elementary, which is a Title I school serving 640 students in a rural community. Kate is currently in her 5th year as a school librarian. And prior to becoming a school librarian, she worked as an elementary school teacher in Alvin ISD, an adjunct professor and academic librarian at the Art Institute of Fort Worth, as well as a library assistant in the children's department at the Rosenberg Library in Galveston. So you've had a very diverse background, wide variety of skills you've picked up. And so everyone, please welcome Kate. We're glad to have you both here tonight. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to recommend to all of you, and I'm also going to do it, I'm going to put the speaker view on so that it's as if we're sitting watching an interview and they're sitting on a sofa going back and forth. And I'm going to hand it over to Kim to start the interview. Go ahead, Kim.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I'm excited to be here and talk with another librarian. So thanks, Kate, as well. And I'll just go ahead and jump in to our first question. As an elementary school librarian, can you describe your day-to-day activities? Which roles bring you the most joy, and which parts of the job might create the biggest challenges for you?
Well, I think, Kim, as you know, as an elementary librarian, day-to-day is a hard thing to describe because we're tasked with a lot of different roles as librarians. It really depends on the day, but there are lots of things that I do regularly. So we are on a schedule where I see every student every week. And with 640-ish students, that keeps us pretty busy. So some days I have 5 classes, some days I have 8 classes, but it keeps me pretty busy. We tend to do a 15-minute lesson and then have about 15 minutes for checkout. And I'm very, very lucky that I have a library aide. So she is able to handle the checking in and checking out of books. And then I can assist with helping kids find appropriate books for them. So that's the meat of my day. And then just in between classes, I collaborate with teachers. If I happen to have a down period between classes, and I know that it's a conference period for 3rd grade, I will try at least once a week to stop by and talk to the 3rd grade teachers. What are you working on? What do you need support with? At the beginning of the year, when we have those back to school days, I try to always reach out to teachers and say, where are you stressed? Where are you worried? Do you only, last year, again, with 3rd grade, I had some teachers say, we only have 2 days to go over fiction and nonfiction. And I said, well, that's an easy problem that we can fix. That's it. I can hit that lesson in the library. So collaboration is a really important thing. It's part of advocacy, I think, to be a resource, not just for the students, but for the teachers. So I work on that. And then there's, managing book orders and reading programs. And it really just, your day is never the same from day to day, and you're always busy. Once a week, we try to, most weeks, we do a makerspace day where the teachers have a double block. And so some of the paraprofessionals and some of the teachers will have students do makerspace activities in different parts of the school. And I do a lot of the work on that, getting those different lessons ready and helping find materials and resources. So it's a lot. It's a busy day. Kim, you never know what to expect some days. I was saying before, I unloaded 14 boxes of books, big boxes of books, about 457 books today. because I had fifth grade out on a field trip. So I had a little bit of time. And so I was processing books today. So every day is a little different and you just have to be ready. That I would say it's probably the joy and the challenge. I love being busy. I am not someone who could just sit behind a desk all day. And it's funny, you know, you get those stereotypes like, oh, you just sit and read books all day. Well, I can't remember the last time I read a book at work. But I love to surround myself with books and find books that are going to speak to kids' hearts. And so that's the joy, is just being busy and being challenged. And then again, flip side, that's the challenge, is trying to find those minutes to do everything you need to do, and try not to take too much home with you. I have a family at home, so finding that balance is sometimes a challenge, but it's definitely worth it.
Well, and I definitely can relate to that. And I like how you described it as like the joy and also the challenge. Because in some ways it's like, you know, every day is not the same. So there's like kind of this freedom, but also then you feel like you always can be doing things. So
Yes.
it's like, yes, like it's always not quite. Yes. And then when you talked about your schedule that you have, is that something you set at the start of the year? Like each year you set that with your teachers and it's kind of set.
I do. And we try as a district to be supportive of our librarians, finding the system that works for them. So some of our campuses have flexible schedules, some of them have fixed schedules. I've always used a fixed, just because personally, I feel like in elementary school that consistency is just super important for the kids. But we try to support that and share each other. And every year I do something different. Every single year. One year I had we decided one year that we were going to have every single teacher, no matter what subject they taught, bring the students, because I do not have the teachers stay with me. And so some of the teachers kind of realized, well, wait, that means that the fifth grade ELA teacher is getting 90 minutes a week. And so it was kind of a rub. And then the other part that I wanted to bring in is I wanted kids to see every teacher coming to the library. So their science teachers bringing them, their math teachers. Sounded like a great idea in theory. I ended up having a 6-week rotating schedule. So we did that for 1 year.
Live and learn.
Yeah.
But I do love that idea of like thinking of new ways, because when you said having each teacher come, I mean, that sounds amazing. And like such a good way.
It was just a little hard.
Practically difficult.
Absolutely.
Sure, I can understand that. Okay. So then moving on to, you are the librarian for both the school district and your home campus, Nelson. So how are the two positions most different, and what are some similarities between them? And I don't want to like inundate you with questions, but you might consider these things. Are there challenges being an elementary lead librarian and serving the entire district that are not a part of being the head librarian at just one campus? And then also then on the other side, some joys that come with each job.
Sure. So it kind of goes with what I was saying earlier. I am the lead librarian. This is my second year in this position. There are 19 schools. We're about to open our 20th elementary school. And so in the position that I'm in, I'm kind of the first line of support for the librarians. If they have a question, if they have an issue on their campus that they need some advice, I'm kind of that person for them. And then I do help with our district meetings, getting those all together. The hardest part of that, I would say, is carving out time. My first priority, my first job is my campus. So my campus is essentially always going to come first. However, I also have to make sure that I'm available for my librarian. And what I love about that is I get different perspectives. I get to go visit librarians on other campuses and other parts. Our district is really unique. It is really, really spread out. We have campuses that are 40 miles from each other. So it's a very different demographic on a different part of our district. So I enjoy getting to problem solve with those librarians and support those librarians. But it is challenging to make sure I'm carving out enough time for them. I'm lucky enough that, again, I can create my own schedule. And so what I do is I have Friday afternoons, usually from about 1 to 3, that is just carved out, and that is my lead librarian time. And I'm always available via email, text, things like that. But that's the time where I really stop and think about, who do I need to check in on, who, might have been having a hard week, whose mom's in the hospital. I kind of make that my time, that I just go through my list of my librarians, see how they're doing, see what needs to be done, what's coming up. So I have to be really intentional with my time, because I do have so many different responsibilities. And I don't ever want to not be there for one or the other. Last Thursday, I actually was asked by a librarian on another campus to help chaperone a field trip. They had an unusual situation where they had 3 grade levels going on a field trip. She was kind of leading this one because it was a reading program that they were celebrating. And so she asked if I could come chaperone. And so I had to kind of reschedule my home campus the day and then go help chaperone kids that I didn't know. So that was an unusual situation, but I was happy to do it. I enjoy it a lot. And I feel like being on a campus, you're the only person in this position. You understand, it's like your counselor, your librarian, you're on an island and no one else does what you do. So you have to make sure that you're reaching out and building those relationships with the other librarians in your district. And, thank God for Twitter. Thank God for being able to connect with people, and finding your people that you have that support. So I feel like in this role, that's kind of my gift, is to reach out and just say, we're here to support you. How can I help? And just be that encouraging voice for them, whether they know they need it or not. You get bogged down. And so it's something that I think is really important, to create that support system for each other.
That's great. Yeah. And I mean, this is my 8th year being a librarian, but that idea of having people, like you said, you're on your own as a librarian at your campus. And that even now, especially as a new librarian, but even now, it's so invaluable to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you have had many different roles in in different libraries too, but you started out as a teacher and taught 3rd grade for several years. So what was it that sparked your desire to become a librarian, and how long did it take you to make that change?
Well, my path is not one that I would recommend to anyone who's hoping to pay off student loans. It was a very winding path, but I wouldn't change anything, because I ended up accumulating skills along the way that put me where I am. So I actually, when I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in literature, I ended up just kind of by happenstance ending up working as a library assistant in Galveston, Texas. I was finishing up my degree at University of Houston, and I just kind of fell in love with it. I was always an avid reader. My bachelor's was in literature, but I had never really considered being a librarian. Ended up absolutely loving it. And my favorite part was programs, working with families, doing story times, just absolutely loved that. So I worked there for 2 years. We ended up moving up to the Fort Worth area after Hurricane Ike. We lived down in Galveston Island. Our house ended up with 4.5 feet of water in it. And my husband had a job opportunity in Fort Worth. And so we jumped into that. While I was in Fort Worth, that's actually when I got my master's in library science. I was close to UNT. I'd heard really good things about the program. So I was lucky enough that I was able to take both face-to-face and online courses. I know a lot of our MLS students are doing most of it online, and I think that that's a great method. I think UNT does a fabulous job of those courses, but I enjoyed getting to actually go to Denton and go, be on campus and have those connections. And then I started working. At the time, there was an Art Institute of Fort Worth. It was a satellite campus of the Art Institute of Dallas. And I was working there as a librarian and really, really loved that. And then at some point, the dean realized that I also had a master's degree in a Master of Arts in Humanities. I didn't mention that. That was another 2-year program. And so he said, oh, well, you're going to run the library, but you're also going to teach. So I got a chance to adjunct for a year there. And that was when the teaching bug really kind of bit. I was teaching adults, but I just loved it. I loved learning from them, sharing with them. So when we moved back to Houston, I got my teaching certification and started teaching 3rd grade and loved it. Loved it. My family was very confused. They thought librarian was the path I was going on. And I loved working in libraries. I loved the academic library, but I really found that my passion was sharing information and watching people learn. And so I taught for 2 years in Texas. Most of you know, to be a school librarian, you do have to teach for 2 years. I had no intention of being a librarian at this point. Our librarian at the time was wonderful and a tiny bit manipulative, and she was retiring. And she said, you have your MLS, you would just have to tack on a few classes to get your school library certification, because at that point I wasn't certified as a librarian. And she said, these kids really deserve somebody who's passionate about books and about teaching, and not someone who's just looking to get out of the classroom. Well, how do you say no to that? So between her and my principal, they said, go ahead and let's do it. So I really didn't have to take too many more courses, some school librarian classes, and I did those through UNT as well. Did my certification, and that was 5 years ago. So, and I absolutely love it. For me, it's the perfect combination of the things that I'm really, really passionate about, which is literacy, reading, and teaching. I get to do all of the things that I accumulated along the way. And I think, UNT does a great job of building those skills into the courses. I feel like I have a pretty strong sense of cataloging and children's literature and all of those things, those little parts of the job that we end up doing for 5 minutes here and there. I feel like I have a solid base in that because of everything that I've done in the past. That was a very long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. Well, and there's so much to tell, but so even though you might not recommend it, it obviously worked out for you. And you kind of touched on this, I feel like, on why you chose UNT, and some highlights of your experience in the program. Is there anything you want to add about UNT specifically, or anything you really enjoyed from the program?
So I do have I have a master's of arts in humanities from the University of Houston Clear Lake, and thought for a while that academia was going to be the path I was going to go on to get my PhD. And I really enjoyed my time there, but I will say the level of connection at UNT, the level of availability at UNT is just really surpasses anything I've seen at other schools. I just feel like your professors, first of all, they're professionals in our field, and I just feel like their experiences and their willingness to connect with their students is just really phenomenal. And everyone that I worked with at UNT, I felt like if I needed something, I could reach out to them. And that is not a universal experience on every campus. So.
Absolutely. Well, that is awesome to hear about such a good experience. So you work in a school in a rural community. What opportunities does working in a rural community present that might not be available in a more urban area? And then are there any challenges you feel are unique to a rural community?
Well, to make a kind of flippant, but also very sincere answer about opportunities, we are a very big agricultural community. We have an ag barn not far from our campus, and we've had our kids go on field trips there and get to learn about the animals. We have lots of students involved in FFA and things like that. One of the things that I love about it is that there's this sense of, we have our district is just about to hit 30,000 students. So it's not a small district, but it feels small and it feels connected, and you feel connected to the community. And there are times when I've had situations with a student where I've had a parent call me and ask something about, he's worried about this. is there a book that we can give him? And they feel comfortable coming in and talking. And one thing that we just recently did, and part of this was to combat a bit of a challenge, we don't have a bookstore within probably 20 miles of our school, which is hard to kind of imagine in the world that we live in, but we don't. There's Walmart, there's a little book section, but for our kids outside of the book fair, they don't have a lot of time to go pick a book on their own. I wrote a grant last year, did some fundraising to get a book vending machine, and it runs on tokens. It's my favorite thing, but part of it was to give the kids the experience of picking out a book of their very own to take home, because that's not something a lot of our kids get to experience. So there are some things that come with working in a rural community that I didn't necessarily expect. Some of their life experiences are a little different. Even though we're close to Houston, you can get to Houston from my campus in about 35-40 minutes. We have kids that have never been to Houston, so we do field trips and things like that. So that is, some of it can be challenging, but I also feel like the flip side of that, just like my day-to-day activities, it's also the joy that comes and the opportunity that comes, because for them, the library is magic. It is one of the only places on campus and in their lives where no one's telling them what to do. And that's something that, and no, not to, shade teachers at all. I loved teaching, but your day is down to the minute and your activities are down to the minute. So I try to make sure that the library is just a place that is welcoming and open and feels magical for them, because they can come and they can find whatever they want and they can get whatever they want, and no one's telling them you have to get this. I fight with my teachers a little bit about that. I have a workaround so that if a teacher says you have to have a biography, you have to have this, it doesn't count toward their checkout numbers, so that's their extra book. But it truly is a privilege to be the person who gets to show them these other worlds. Again, the challenging part is a lot of our students don't have a ton of life experience. And so for them, books become even more important because they truly are seeing the world through those books. And I try to always greet them. And, when they come in, I say, good morning, good afternoon, I'm glad you're here. And they feel that and they know that. And so they don't have the bookstores. They don't have everything given to them. They don't have a lot of books at home. We are a Title I campus. I've had more than one student tell me at the book fair, this is the first time I've ever bought a book. So I think it's much more of a privilege than it is a challenge. And I can't imagine not working in a Title I school for sure.
Well, thanks, Kate. I really love hearing you describe it. Like, I feel like you just have this vision for what you want your library to be and what it means to your students. You can hear that that's what's happening, that you are creating that. And the responsiveness to the needs of your community that you talk about, and I feel like that's good to hear, like to think about. I mean, every library is different, every librarian is different, and the needs of the community, and hearing you respond to that is really neat. Also wanted to stress that thing, the workaround you said about if the teacher says, because in my experience, this happens all the time. And like wanting the library to be a place where they can choose. And again, like you said, nothing against the teachers, but the library is a place where hopefully you can create the opportunity where they do have choice. So I appreciate you sharing that about the workaround.
And I do think it's sometimes that part of our job as, again, it's not just supporting students, it's supporting teachers. And sometimes that means educating teachers and having those conversations that can be a little uncomfortable. I had a teacher that was mentioning she wanted her students to get a certain level book. Well, I don't have levels on my books. I don't have AR stickers on my books. And I do encourage the kids to pick up a book, open it up, read a little bit, read a paragraph. Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel too easy, too hard? Are you interested? And so I've had to have those conversations that's not what the library's for. This is not a place to do guided reading. This is the place that they are going to flourish if you let them make their own choices. And so I try to do it with love and with a good attitude, but I do try to have those conversations because some of them have just never considered it. They're in their own bubble. They're thinking, I need this kid to be challenging themselves. And the thing that I like to tease them with is, do you always read on your reading level? Right? Like, when's the last time you sat down with a physics textbook? You can read that, right? So why aren't you? And
Right.
so those are the conversations that I think become part of advocating for your students.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, I feel like it's like kind of always a balance, like trying to figure out, and you have to be strategic about it. Like, because it is, both are important, that relationship with your students and with your staff, and supporting both. So
Absolutely.
thanks for mentioning all that. Okay. So you did talk about your time as an academic librarian just for a bit at the Art Institute of Fort Worth. Did you want to talk about any skills that you gained in that position that transfer well into your current role as the school librarian?
Well, that was the first position that I was in charge of ordering books, which is a huge part of your job, whether you're an academic librarian or a public librarian. And I think having not being an art person necessarily, literature, but not a fine arts person, I had to really immerse myself in book reviews and find those resources to help support what my students needed. And one of the best resources for me, and this has stayed with me forever, I almost always have a notebook on the circulation desk, is to ask my students, granted then these are adults, but what do you need? What do you need in your classes? What do you need in your personal life? What do you need? What do you not see in the library? How can I help you? And that's definitely something. And I think because I knew so little, that I just had to embrace my own lack of education in that area and just immerse myself in reviews and different sources, and then just asking for help. And I think that is something that people kind of can struggle with sometimes, is you feel like you have to have all the answers. Don't feel like that. There are resources out there to help you, and you go find things and ask for help and ask for support. And if you're a new librarian, go ask someone in your district, what do you use? What do you do you go to Kirkus? Do you go to Booklist? What do you do? And then, lo and behold, you find, oh, there's this system that will, aggregate all of those, and you can look at all the reviews. And so I think just that willingness to ask questions and be curious and educate myself is something that I think in any career is a transferable skill. I also really enjoyed the questions I would get working at the Art Institute, because I would have students come and say, I saw this book, it's about photography, it's got a purple cover. Great, that's fantastic. Anything else to help me? So I got to learn, get to help them learn about keywords and titles and fun things like that. But the skills between adults and children is really not that different.
I can see that. One I'll get all the time. Do you know this book with a blue cover? Like, yeah, actually, I do actually. It's funny how often it does work out.
Yes, I had a student asking for, she was a second grader, and she said, she was actually asking my library aide, and I was just standing nearby, and she said, a second grader, mind you, well, Miss Hebert read it to us in kindergarten, and there were carrots with faces, and I just went, it's creepy carrots. She wants creepy carrots. We got it. We got there.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do that my first year, I will say, but because that, like, speaking to that willingness to, I think it's great to be able to say to my kids, you know it better than I do. Like, and I taught first as a high school teacher, and I don't claim to know everything.
Right.
And so any librarian in any situation, like, there's going to be things you don't know, and that's okay.
Yeah. And a lot of my students know I don't read any of the horror books. And so I tell them, read it, tell me what you think. And they do. They'll come back and they'll say, oh, you have to get more by this author. And so we build a collection for them because it is for them. So just that willingness to just get on board and see what you need to learn.
I love that. Okay. Okay, so the other library also that you've worked in, the children's department at the
Yes.
Rosenberg Library in Galveston. So what are some of the differences and similarities between serving children in that public library setting compared with the school setting?
For me, and obviously I'm only speaking to my own experiences,
Right.
I loved working in the library. I really enjoyed it. It was my public librarian friends, hopefully are never going to watch this. It's a little slower paced. There are moments of crazy busyness. Summer, basically all of summer is insane. But it's a little slower paced. The upside of that is you can have some really wonderful connections with people. You have your regulars that bring their kids in every week on Tuesday after school. You have those regulars that really get you through the day, and you end up having a really strong connection with them. You end up finding books for them when they're not even there, because oh, they're gonna love that story. It is a little slower pace. There's some similarities. That's where I fell in love with storytelling. I have a bit of a performer's heart that I didn't know I had, and a willingness to be silly with my pre-Kers and do voices. And I didn't know that was in me as someone who was fairly not quiet in school, but I was a reader, but I was not a performer. And so that was kind of the first little inkling of, oh no, I do really like this. I do like doing story times. So there is quite a bit of overlap. It's just kind of different when it's busy. Summer reading is a whole other beast. God bless public librarians, because they truly know how to program summer reading like nothing else. And so I'm happy to tag off with them in the summer and let them take over.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. Well, yeah, I guess it makes sense. We're the busiest in the school and they're busiest during summer. Okay, so tell us about the leadership opportunities you've had and any reasons you feel that you've been chosen for them.
I think that it's a good question. I have pursued leadership, and I think one thing that doesn't necessarily come naturally to some librarians, and to myself on some levels, is putting yourself out there and advocating for yourself. And I will say that learning how to advocate for myself as a librarian, because it's so important that you are visible and you are letting your community know who you are, what you contribute to the school, for many reasons: to build relationships, to make sure that community knows who you are and that you have the best interest of your kids in mind, whether it's your staff, parents, administrators, district people, whoever, whether it's newsletters or just making sure that you're involved, clubs, coaching, different things like that. Learning how to advocate for myself and learning how to speak to the strengths of my programming kind of led me to realize that I do have some interesting background that might help people. And honestly, what really started for me, the idea of stepping into a bigger leadership role, it happened during COVID. We had a situation where we had a new assistant principal, and it was the year that we were all masked and scared and not knowing what we were doing. And I just had a lot of people coming to me with questions. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Part of that is the library becomes the information desk, right? On my campus, I'm right next to the office. I don't have walls. So we truly do become the information desk. And then I was a familiar face, and I work really hard to be welcoming. I tell every staff member when I do a training at the beginning of the year, if I don't know the answer to the question, I will find it. I will help you find it, whether it's who you need to talk to if you have a problem with technology, whether it's whatever you need. Even if it's not related to the library, come ask me, because I feel like most librarians have just this kind of warehouse in their heads, and it's the best thing ever when someone asks you a question. Yes, this is my chance. I get to share some of that information. And so I feel like I started getting the sense of maybe there's more here that I can do. I also had a kind of a strange situation where I was coming in with a group of 5 librarians in my district. It was a pretty big year for us as far as new librarians. And the other librarians were wonderful, but there was very much a sense of, good luck, like, you're going to do great.
Mhm.
There wasn't a super strong onboarding process. I didn't feel like I had a ton of support from individual librarians. I did, but we didn't have a system in place. At the time, we had one lead librarian, and she was a junior high librarian. So she was a wonderful person, but she couldn't answer a lot of my questions. And so we've actually split where we have a secondary lead librarian as we're growing, and then an elementary lead librarian. And I always go back to that. What do I want in a leader? And what didn't I have that I think people would benefit from? And so that's kind of what I focus on. And I feel like I've been chosen for those. It ruffled a few feathers when I was hired as the lead librarian. There were several other librarians who were interested in the position, who'd been there with the district longer. I think my diverse background absolutely played a factor. Just having some different strengths, having a new perspective, I think ended up actually benefiting me. And I also try really hard, and this is something that you don't hear a lot about, but it's absolutely true. I always try to put kids first and always come from a place of honesty and integrity and having some real thought behind what I do. So at the end of the day, someone might not agree with my systems. They might not agree with the way that I do things, but there's usually a pretty good reason for it. And I feel pretty strongly that I can kind of defend those reasons and talk things through with people. So I think that's kind of what led them to having me in that position.
Well, I love how you describe that. You're like the honesty and your intentions and the communication, I think, especially. And oh, wait, I had to ask this. You said no walls. You have no walls?
I have a staircase. I'm trying to how I can describe this to you. So no, I don't have walls. I have a circulation desk, and then I have an office that I'm rarely in. One side is completely open. There's a staircase that goes up to the 3rd grade, and then the staircase, but no, the classrooms are directly above my library. They look down onto us. I get to say hi to my 2nd graders all day long. So, but I like that. I like that everybody can kind of see what we're doing and kind of get excited. My favorite's when there's a 2nd grader that's going upstairs and they're trying to look and see what lesson we're doing. Like, I'm gonna see you in 30 minutes. Go. Yeah, I love it open.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like I want to see a picture. So, but it sounds really cool. Okay. So which library conferences do you feel are most relevant to your current role, and what topics are most popular with audiences these days?
I have a pretty strong opinion about conferences, and it might get me in a little bit of trouble. I do have a membership with TCEA. I think that leaning into the technology side of what we do is super important. Hands down, I love learning about new programs, new software, new apps, implementing new things. Absolutely love that. But I feel very strongly that the most impactful conferences for me personally are library conferences. So TLA, nothing can touch it. If you get the opportunity to go to TLA, just go. It renews your energy in why you're doing what you're doing, whether it's hearing an author talk about their process or talking to another librarian, and you have these moments of, oh, wow, I've never thought of that, a program idea, or just the support in the community. Again, going back to, we are kind of on an island in the library, so going and connecting with other librarians, I think, is extremely important. In the Houston area, we're really lucky. In the summer, the Clear Creek ISD has a free conference called Setting the Trend. And I presented at that last year. I'm presenting at that again this year. And it's just a great time to connect and learn from other librarians. And that one's much more librarian focused. And less author focused, but it's again, I think anytime you can connect with other librarians, it's just really important. I have nothing against TCEA. In my district, I have to choose. So we have to pick one, and I will pick TLA every time. So as far as topics that I think are popular, you have some of the big trends. You know, a few years ago, makerspace was just the thing. Everybody was trying to figure it out. What is makerspace? And then to translate that, what does it mean to me? And that's still, I think, something that we're doing because we're asked to do so much. And some of us don't have that background because it's a little coming from left field for some people. They have this passion for books, passion for literacy. And then all of a sudden, oh no, you need to learn how to code robots. So I think there's a little bit of panic behind that. And now you're starting to see more nuanced takes on makerspace. One session that I presented last year was something that I feel really strongly about is almost anytime I do makerspace, I tie it to a book. I tie it to a children's book. I was lucky enough this year, I was able to, with all of my, actually all grades did the books, but with the 4th and 5th graders, I did a special author study. So we used all of the Andrea Beatty texts, the Rosie Revere engineer, Iggy Peck architect. We did 5 sessions. So it ended up working out. We had Sophia Valdez, Future Prez. What am I missing? Ada Twist scientist, and one more. What was the other one? Oh, Aaron Slater Illustrator was my last one. So what we did, and I told the kids, I said, listen, I follow the author on Twitter and she follows me and she knows we're doing this. And so we would read the book and then we would do a makerspace activity that was tied to it. We ended with Aaron Slater Illustrator and we had a coding robot named Artie 3000 that the kids coded and then he would draw a picture. And so I think you're getting a little more nuanced as far as the makerspace things where people are making it work for them. And that's what I needed to do for me. Not everybody needs to do that. Some people are like, let's go build bridges, and that's fantastic. So that's always going to be popular. Programming is always going to be popular. This summer I'm not presenting at TLA, but I am presenting again this summer at Setting the Trend. I'm doing a curriculum, how to create a curriculum. We spent the last 2 years as a district writing elementary, junior high, and high school curriculum, why you need curriculum, how to do it, and then what we have in it is what we're presenting. But you can see all sorts of amazing things at conferences that you might not have ever considered. And just like books become doors and windows for us, I think conferences are that same thing where you're like, oh, I didn't even think about, I need to think about this. And so, you don't know what you don't know. So going to a conference and immersing yourself in that and really, really digging in and finding those things that speak to you are just, it's you can't measure the importance of something like that.
Yeah, and that continued growth, I think, is like you're speaking to, is so good. And I didn't think you were talking trash about TCEA, so I feel like you described it well.
I'm a member. I love it. I do like their webinars, but if I have to pick, it's always gonna be library.
Well, my first time to TLA, I said I feel like it's a pep rally for librarians.
Yeah, and you need it.
Yeah.
You need it.
Absolutely. Well, I'll be there at TLA this year too. So, and then you spoke about like regional or like local conferences.
Yes.
And I know like for us, I'm in North Texas, and Region 11 has a conference.
Yes.
And so looking out for those is always a good idea
Absolutely.
too. And we're getting closer on time. So I don't know, were there any other, do you want to talk about grants? Do you want to talk about what roles have been most beneficial to your professional development?
I'd love to touch on grants for a second.
Okay.
Because I feel like grants is one of those things that is so intimidating to new librarians
or old ones.
Yeah, they're so beneficial. And I have been really lucky with grants. I've gotten 4 or 5 in the last 5 years. And my advice is to jump in, right? Just find what you want. Start with if you're lucky enough to have an education foundation in your district, start with those. And just think about what you need what you want, dream big. We've had, I helped a friend last year write one of the grants for the Laura Bush grants, and she was a recipient of that. And so just put yourself out there and be willing to try, because ultimately, what can they do? They can say no, and you haven't lost anything because you've learned something in the process. I did a books and bots that's starting with my pairing my makerspace with something, and we actually created checkout kits, because when we opened, we were a STEM certified campus, and so we were one of the first in Texas, and so our parents were like, what is STEM? What is STEAM? And so I thought, how can I help them? And so we have these little take-home kits. It's got a book, it's got a little activity, and then it talks them through that. That's a grant I wrote 2 years. I did a again, rural community. Some of our kids have never gone to see a musical or a play. And we were lucky enough that Main Street Theater in Houston has a traveling program. And I said, let's find a book related musical and bring it here. We were hoping to do Rosie Your Engineer. That's what we wrote the grant for. It was the COVID year, so our grant actually rolled over, and we were so lucky. We ended up getting Dragons Love Tacos as a musical, and our kids, probably once every 2 weeks, a kid comes and talks to me about that program.
I bet.
It was phenomenal. We made little paper tacos that were like rattle, like noisemakers. It was a whole thing. And so, and that 100% would not have been possible without a grant. And then I mentioned earlier my book vending machine. That was something that I felt really strongly about. It's the positive office referrals. So if the students, I wanted to catch those kids that are always doing the right thing and give them that opportunity to pick out a book to take home. So that's my advice. Just try, just put yourself out there. Don't be intimidated. The worst that can happen is they say no.
Exactly. Awesome. Thanks, Kate. When it looks like we're at our Q&A, Lisa, is that right?
That's right. We're about to start the Q&A section, although nobody has put a question in the chat, but of course you're also welcome to just raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can turn on your mic and ask your question verbally if you'd like to. But I do want to make a couple comments. First of all, I wanted to say it's so great you're both going to be at TLA, right?
Yes.
Kate, you said yes.
Yes.
So I hope you both will come to the Alumni and Friends dinner on reception on Friday if you have a chance. Did you get an invitation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So please join us if you can. We're going to have, a few alumni awards and a little presentation from Dr. Schultz-Jones. And I do see that we have an interesting audience tonight. We have Dr. Lund and Dr. Moore here, two of our professors in the department. And Dr. Lund is new. I don't know if he has a question. Did you have Dr. Moore, Kate, as a professor?
I'm trying to remember. I don't know. I don't know that I did.
I did at TWU and then now at UNT.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've had.
And she's amazing.
Excellent. Excellent. And then I also noticed that we have some, students here tonight that are not in the library science program, but that are in other programs in College of Information, which I love to see that cross-discipline, people coming from other like linguistics or the learning technologies field to come and listen about library science. I actually interviewed a linguist, a bachelor's of linguistics student who's graduating, and he said, my plan is to go for the master's in library science because I want to work in an academic library and keep helping students. He was helping as an RA for many years. So,
yes.
Okay. So does anyone want to ask a question? We're happy to take your questions now. Kate will be here for the next 10 minutes to answer questions. Okay, it looks like Jeremy has a question in the chat. So Jeremy asks, what suggestions do you have for a new librarian who's trying to get classes back in the library? The library was closed last semester, and after COVID, classes are not used to going for checkout or lessons. Oh, that's interesting.
That is absolutely something that I think a lot of us struggled with. I'm not sure what level.
He says elementary school library.
Okay, perfect. So you have to be a tiny bit, again, this goes back to advocating for yourself in your program. You have to be a tiny bit manipulative sometimes. You go to the teachers and it becomes, how can I help this teacher? what resource does this teacher need? And making those connections with your teachers and letting them see, oh, wow, this is a valuable resource for me. Our teachers are overwhelmed and busy, and you can go to them. What are you guys studying right now? What are you working on? What unit are you working on? Oh, well, I have some resources for that. Why don't I pull those resources and you guys can come in and we'll look at our biographies together. We'll look at our nonfiction together. So just to make sure that you're making your connections with your teachers. If you have a flexible schedule, make sure that everybody knows how to sign up for your times. Talk to your principal. Ask your principal what can we do? How in the past have we done this? And just keep trying. Another option would be to take your library to them. When we were not allowed to have classes during COVID, I would take my little cart, I would load it up with books, and I would just stop at their doors and I would knock on their doors and say, hey, have your kids had a chance to get books this week? And I would take my laptop and check out books to them right there. So know their schedule, know their what they're teaching, what they need, and just make sure that you are just very, very visible.
If you were in a library with no walls, that
Exactly.
that might help. It is, I definitely, it's been a long time since I've been in school, but I do have memories of the library kind of being like at the back of the school, through a door, even down a hall maybe. And
Yeah.
I like the concept of it being kind of out there in the center stage. So Jeremy says, thanks, this week we are doing a book fair and I finally got lots more kids and classes in. So the book fair is probably a great idea too, right?
There's nothing like book fair. I mean, and again, work with your teachers. So if you're doing Scholastic book fair, sometimes you can get a $5 off of 20 for teachers. And so for me, it really comes back to building relationships with the students, of course, because they will pester the teachers, but you have to get the teachers to see the value. And so you have to sometimes be a little sneaky about that, but just make sure that there's some value for them as well.
Okay, thank you for your question, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Ready to take other questions if anyone has any. I did have a little bit of a follow-up question to the grant question that Kim asked you. I know you said all they can do is say no. That's absolutely true. But how much time does it take to get a grant written and submitted and all the effort that goes into it? I know it's a learning process. I buy that for sure. But talk about the timing.
So for the grants that I've gotten most frequently have been Education Foundation grants. And I'm lucky enough to work in a district that we do have a great Education Foundation, and they do $1,000 grants for innovative teaching. And I stop and I think, what do I need the most? What would have the most impact for the most students? And once I did the first one, it was like, okay, it's a lot like lesson planning. You have your objective, so it's not a huge stretch for what we're doing. The thing that's usually ends up being the most time consuming is the more technical stuff. So your budgeting and filling out those forms and things like that. I would just say, jump in and do what you can when you can. And if you need approvals from other people, if you need technology approval, if you need campus approval, get those early, because you don't want to be the person that's going to the principal last minute. Oh, I need this signed tomorrow. You don't want to do that. So just give yourself ample time to do that. I got smarter in year two, and I realized that the application process was pretty similar each year. And so I copied the format, and now every year I have a Google Doc that I can just plug in what I'm doing that year and just trying. So my goal actually for this coming school year is to push myself a little farther for some bigger grants.
Sounds exciting. So we have some library science students here. What would you recommend that they be doing now to get prepared for a future career in the libraries?
I would say the more time you can spend in libraries, the better. Even beyond, I know adding anything to your plate when you're a student is a little daunting, but when I was getting my teaching certification, and then when I was getting my master's in library science, some of the most impactful moments for me were getting to actually see how libraries function, how classrooms function, and you kind of start to go, oh, well, I don't want to do that, or I do want to do that, or you get experience seeing, if you don't have a lot of hands-on experience with makerspace, maybe go volunteer. If you have kids of your own, volunteer at their school, ask their librarian what you can do to help, and just kind of start to feel out what kind of librarian you want to be and what level you want to teach, if you want to be junior high or high school. And you definitely don't want to be in a position where I got my master's degree, it's shiny and ready to go, and then you end up in a situation and you're like, oh no, I hate 5-year-olds, so just to get that experience.
That's very good advice. Very good advice. When I was a senior in college, I realized I didn't want to be a teacher of high school students during my last semester doing my student teaching.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we have time for one more question. We've just got about 3 minutes to the top of the hour. So if anybody has one more question, you can also ask Kim a question if you'd like to. I see you have a few of your classmates here. Maybe they're not in your cohort, but I do see some other PhD information science students here.
I'd love to hear about Kim's STEAM lab, what your STEAM activities look like. Because ours, like I said, ours is once a week, and that we have a little lab that we do it in, or in the library, but it sounds like you have a whole separate area.
We do. Is a former computer lab and is now, I've called it the Creation Commons, is the name of it. So it's been like 6.5 years in the making. And that I've been, it started with like thinking, like trying to get teachers to come to do things. And like, I always just like start with one teacher and then that whole grade and then continue and then basically tell them they're coming, not ask them if they're coming. This is like over, 6.5 years ago, I had to ask them. Now they come every month. So I do K through 2, 1 week of the month. I make activities for them, 45 minutes of STEAM activities. And then the next week is grade 3 through 5. And so 2 weeks out of the month, we're doing those things in the Creation Commons. And I did, when you talked about the books and bots and all those things, that's generally like how I will talk to if a librarian's wanting to like get into more like STEAM-y things, but maybe unsure or reluctant or, whatever it is. I'm like, well, if you like books, which probably you do, that's where I get my inspiration. Like that's always where I start and then go somewhere from there. Like to me now it just kind of like flows. Like I just think of things that come from books that lead to other things. And we're really lucky in the resources we have. So I wanted to ask you, Kate, if you have any favorite robots, because I do. So wondering if you did, if there's something I need.
RD 3000 has been just a huge hit. With my younger ones, Botley, they really love their Botleys, the ones that have the remotes, the B-bots. We have Botleys and B-bots. I like the ones that are a little more bulky and hardy like that, where I'm not worrying about them. Sometimes with the little ones, like the little Ozobots and things like that, it gets a little, they're a little, but you like Ozobots. Ozobots are great. So
they're not my favorite, I'll say, but just be honest. Yeah. But we just got Indy, which is Spiro's like for younger kids robot. And that's the one I talk about all the time now. Yeah. I tell people like, if you are thinking of one robot, even though I don't think that's versatile, like pre-K to 5, like other ones are, but I love that thing. So Indy's one of my faves right now.
Awesome.
And you're saying Indy, INDIE?
INDI.
INDI. Okay. All right. Just in case someone's taking notes. I don't know anything about robots. So I didn't think we were going to have a robot conversation.
I love a robot conversation.
Yeah. Well, actually, you've brought us to the end of the hour. So we're up at the 8 o'clock time now. So I would just like to thank you, Kate and Kim, for coming tonight and giving us a fascinating discussion about all things in the elementary school library, plus other things that we didn't expect. I see lots of people saying thank you in the chat. And I also see a link that Adam has dropped in the chat. I think it's maybe a robot link. Spiro?
It's worth it. It's worth it, I promise.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to thank the audience too. I know that your time is valuable. So coming to these events, we always appreciate it. It helps us be motivated to do more events, and we hope that you find them valuable.